Electrocast.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Brain Arcade Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Cross, currently a studio creative director with over 30 years of experience in the game industry. And today we're going to talk about cognitive load and what that means for building reward systems in games. How Skyrim is a slot machine and the exponential time difference between a 70% game and 100%. My guest today is Liam McDonough, the founder of Nova Codes with a background in neuroscience. He has a ton of experience in games and science and has made games to help kids' brains act more now. It's going to be a good one. Let's get into it.
Yeah.
Full of nothing.
Yeah, just a little.
Have I told you the all right, here's a simple truth, and this applies to what you just said. Every game has to pass through the rest stops of it sucks, it's bad, then it's okay, it's good, it's great, then you can be awesome. It might be a momentary stop through it sucks and it's bad.
Mm-hmm.
And you could definitely speed through some of those to it's good or great. But you cannot get to awesome without passing through everything in between. Like you cannot go directly to awesome.
No.
Right? There is zero chance that you can design on paper something that will be awesome in the first try. Zero. Okay. I'm good at documentation and I'm good at envisioning a whole fucking game. Everything, because it's the way we did things in the 90s, like top to bottom. If you want, I can write you hundreds of pages of systems design. However, I think on a good day, I think, and it depends on genre, if we go to a 2000s style first person shooter, I can design it on paper with only a 10% degree of miss. So basically I can hit 90% on paper. Something fresh from scratch, brand new, I think I might be able to hit 75% on paper that never needs adjusting. Even at peak performance, let's say I can get 90% of a game written on paper that you can make, and it's like only 10% away from awesome.
Mm-hmm.
You still have to iterate on that 10% to fill it. There's going to be shifts and changes. The methodology that you have to learn or teach is actually not how to get to 100% on paper or 75% or 90%. It's how do you deal with the stuff that went undefined or needs changing. Because the things that you consider solid on paper are easy. The loss in time and efficiency in games is actually indecision. Indecision is the enemy of budgets. Period.
It's so interesting that you say this because I listened to something recently that like in software, but like also in games particularly, right?
Yeah.
It was a story of a manager who like had no coding experience or tech experience. And he was talking to the software team and they go, "Hey, Jim, we're 90% done." And Jim was like, "Oh my gosh, yes, we're 90% done." And he's like, "No.
Yeah.
The dev goes, No, wait. It means we're a third of the way finished."
Right.
we've still got 2/3. That's how long the last 10% takes. And he goes, "Oh, right. Okay." Then he goes right back to his office.
Yeah. Well, here, let me put it to you this way because it does grow geometrically. I can make a 70 rated game in my sleep.
Sure.
Getting from 70 to 80 takes as much time as it took to get to 70. Getting from 80 to 90 rated game takes as much time as it took to do 70 and 80.
Mm-hmm.
Anything above 90 is luck.
Yeah.
Not luck, but it's basically like you cannot hit 100%. I know there was a couple of Metacritic 100% games back in the day, but there's a lens that you have to look through and then it becomes subjective, right?
Mm-hmm.
But oh my God, this is a hot take for another time, but put a pin in this for later. Grand Theft Auto is amazing. I'm not detracting from Grand Theft Auto. Like what I'm going to say now is like going to cause hate. But Grand Theft Auto, the whole series, Red Dead Redemption 2, most open world games, Crackdown, Saints Row, is an amalgam of 70s. Okay.
Are you saying there's a bunch of 70s within the game itself, or it's...
Yes, correct. It's basically it's Voltron.
Yeah.
You have a 70 rated driving game. You have a 70 rated shooting game. You have a 70 rated exploration game. You have a 70 rated parkour system. You have a 70 rated. Like, you see where I'm going with this? Is basically every system in most of these open world games is actually not 100% like solid. Like, you couldn't release it by itself. It's the amalgam of all of them, the combinatory effect of choice in being able to do all of the different things. Now, I'm not saying they're bad, but what I'm saying is, like, you couldn't take any one of like the individual systems and make a whole game just on that and stand it against, like, let's take driving. You can't take the driving out of GTA and stand it up against Need for Speed, right? Or sorry, let's actually go even, let's put them up against Goliath. Especially in the sim zone, not arcade driving, you cannot like compare driving in Grand Theft Auto versus Gran Turismo. It's
Absolutely
bumper
not.
cars, you know, versus you know, like F1.
F1.
So, and that's not bad. The lesson is actually the stated promise of GTA is not actually is they've never stated that they have the most amazing driving ever. They have the most amazing open world where you can do anything. And so because it's wide, there's a wide set of features, you can only go so deep.
So what do you think happened with Cyberpunk then? Like, because some of these, what I'm seeing now is like the Starfields of the world and these open world games are getting so complex. Like they're
So I agree. And it's interesting. So I've played a little bit of Cyberpunk, but basically I kind of lost interest early on because it just felt so daunting. And I think it was a presentation issue, not, well, it was daunting, but at the same time slow. I was like, oh, you're slow ramping me into the world, but I'm like, I've only been in a couple of rooms, right? Like in a car in a couple of rooms or whatever. And like, there's something about like ramping into the experience that's not working for me. I'll come back and play more of it later, but like in my head, I want to be cruising around Night City as a fixer slash, you know, runner. It's kind of free form, able to do whatever I want, and it's just like I don't want to get bogged down in all of your like ludonarrative dissonance that's going to happen because you're trying to treat me like a generic character, but but you also need me to give me this storyline, right? Whereas like Starfield, Fallout, Skyrim, all made by the same people. It's literally almost the same pattern. Why isn't Starfield hitting?
Right.
Why doesn't it hit me in the same spot? Right. And I've already said Skyrim and it's better than Fallout 4 or even 76. 76 is a little bit better in this comparison. Skyrim is the best 3D geometry experience that is a slot machine. It is the best translation to like a slot machine payout of any game that I've ever played, except for maybe Vampire Survivors, which is literally a slot machine.
Literally a slot machine.
But basically,
or Super Auto Pets, which is literally a slot machine.
Super Auto Pets, yeah, totally. But like, what I'm saying is like, if you take the feeling that you get of the reward variability, and express it into a 3D world, it's Skyrim.
Tell me more.
Okay, all right. So when you cruise around Skyrim, there's two key systems that pay this off, and they start to get very deep, and you you know, in a way, you eventually get to this point where you don't realize how much you've learned, but you have, right? So you're cruising around the world, and a little empty icon shows up on your minimap, and then it has no context. You go explore it, you learn what's in that type of icon, it fills in, right? Inside that icon is something like an experience or a dungeon or a cave or possibly an outside point of interest, and it will be categorized to give you a certain level of reward or even a certain type of reward, right? So when I see cave, I know I'm going to get like the type of reward that I get from taking on wildlife. When I see, you know, when I see like, you know, ancient dungeon, I'm like, oh my, I might have a chance at getting some sort of artifact or even a word of power. Like when I see this, like, so basically these icons start to take context, right? Okay. This is why people get stuck in the side missions in games like Skyrim, etc. Because you start to filter the icons by what's interesting to you. or like the things that you're working on.
And like the dependencies or the internal goals that you're looking to achieve, right? Like,
Right.
yeah.
Exactly. Like, oh, I'm playing a two-handed weapon fighter. And
Yeah.
so I like literally, you know what? I just need orichalcum bars,
Yeah.
which are almost always in this type of icon, which I need to go do X, Y, and
Mhm.
Z. Okay. Now the reason I say it's like a slot machine is if you abstract back another layer to just like I'm cruising the world. That empty icon represents possibility. There's a possible adventure over there. And there's a choice. Do I go on that adventure or not? Now, here's the thing. If you open up the map and turn on all the icons,
Mhm.
they are all relatively evenly spaced as far as like distribution.
Okay.
The reason I say it's like a slot machine expressed in 3D is that you cannot walk more than 5 minutes in any direction and not discover a new icon.
Sure.
Right. And so the slot machine expresses itself in these opportunities or possibilities of like, ooh, do I want to do that? And so you never feel bored because you're actively deciding to do or not do things. Right. And it puts you into your tactical and objective space by just presenting an empty icon. Right.
Would you say that in gaming, the need to make decisions is what fuels kind of motivation? And then like on the top end, like having too many decisions would be okay. I'm curious your answer to that, and I have another question.
Yes, because basically it's paralysis analysis.
Yeah.
Like it's not only that you have to provide variety, but you need to provide the right amount. And did we ever talk about the rule of sevens?
We talked about Cross's rule for timing.
Oh, okay. Here, let's talk about brain space for a little bit.
Sure.
All right. Side footnote: we're going to talk about the rule of sevens now.
Okay.
American license plates, phone numbers minus the area code, colors in Bust a Move, shapes in Tetris, etc. They're all 7. And 7 is the cognitive limit of individual items you can hold in your brain.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. There's like other corollaries.
Is the caveat though.
Say what?
Comfortably is the caveat there. I think people can go up to like 10, but yes.
Comfortably. And this is not, yeah, it is not the limit of things that you can hold in your brain. It's the comfort /
ease
before something changes.
Yeah, there's like a mega drop off at 8, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
So some people can hold more, some people can hold less, but generally 7 individual things. Okay. The analysis paralysis hits around the same time.
Mm-hmm.
There's another one. If you want to have a meeting where everybody participates, don't invite more than 6. There's plenty of like apocryphal like world examples of like sticking to the rule of sevens. Okay. When you are bored in video games, your cognitive capacity is bored. You're only handling 2, maybe 3 things.
Oh, how cool. Sure.
Okay. So this is a generalization, right? So let's take the old lady at 3 slot machines example. She started with 1 slot machine and she's hitting max bet. And she's not bored. She's not active, but she's not bored because the variability of the reward is what she's waiting for, not the spin of the reels. So the activity is not the repetitious part. It's the payouts that becomes repetitious because her brain is skipping ahead to the payouts of like, oh, 1 cherry, 2 bars, 3 bars. Like she's just looking at results and trying to do pattern recognition. She moved to 3 machines simultaneously because her brain said, I can take on more. How far is your wingspan? Right?
She upgraded.
I will 300% my chances to win by tapping 3 buttons at a time. And so I'm not saying that she's like actively engaged, but she's no longer bored or complaining about repetition, right? She thinks she might win the jackpot at any minute on any of these 3. So she has a heightened emotional investment in what's going on. Okay. That example is what I use when I say the problem in the repetitive gameplay that you have in your current game is not about the activity. So stop trying to spice it up. It's about how you're rewarding the repetition. Because literally, Skyrim, every combat follows the same pattern depending on how you built your character. Right? There's nothing changing in the mechanics from point to point. In fact, I've fought the same monsters repetitively in
Every
these
time.
dungeons
Yeah.
every time. But what's different is the reward space possibility. And so back to the rule of sevens, when I'm cruising the world, you'll also notice on that mini map, I'm never presented with more than like 3 or 4 at a time within a distance. Like there's one over here, there's one over there, there's one over there. I'm not sure what distance they are till I go to the map, but at least I can categorize the things. Okay, other question. You had a follow-up question. Before I move, I'm going to wrap this all back in a sec.
I think go for it. I think go for it.
Okay, all
Yeah.
right. So, rule of sevens has come into play. Variable rewards has come into play. But what makes walking around the world like a slot machine, right?
Exactly.
It's actually regular possibility space. And that's why I was saying I never have more than 3 or 4 icons on screen, like, in my mini map.
Mm-hmm.
But generally, there's always about 3 or 4 to make a decision on.
So it's at that
Always.
nice range of there's something I can always do, but there's not too much that it's like almost scary.
That's right. So like when I do go to like setting at a self-setting an objective and start to consider higher level things,
Mhm.
I am always presented with a decision space that is not singular.
Okay. Yeah.
Right?
Right.
Okay. Now, here's the final part of the transition into quantitatively making it a slot machine. Is that
Okay.
basically
I'm ready.
to achieve that like decision space, the mathematical breakdown is player max stick speed or walk speed,
Mhm.
right? Versus distance traveled, which then drives the metrics of how far away to make these points of interest. So like if I travel 5 minutes, I will be presented like with the decision space like 3 times or twice. It's actually twice, I think. But basically there's
okay.
so
Yeah.
like the slot machine is literally just walking the world. So back to Mario 64 example,
Mhm.
walking around the world of Skyrim is fun by itself because it engages your possibility space, right?
Mhm. And then Mario 64 would be different in what
Oh,
way?
it's different. It's only the same in the fact that like they've achieved the macro goal of navigation is fun,
Mhm. Oh, sure.
right?
Yeah, you're walking
You see
around
what I'm
this
saying?
map.
So
Yes.
navigation is fun in a different way, but basically navigation in Skyrim, literally just walking the space is interesting.
It's very interesting.
Okay, Fallout 4, very similar pattern, very similar sort of thing. In fact, they've got some other mechanics like a radio. So you could stop in a space that seems like it's kind of empty, turn on your radio and say, "Look, there's a channel
Yeah.
that I didn't know about. Oh, look, it's a distress call. I have a new space to go to," right?
Mhm.
And so they present the possibility space in a slightly different
So
Starfield.
yeah, so what did Starfield do differently? And admittedly, I'm like, if you could break it down for someone who doesn't know Starfield, because I've never actually played it, to be honest with you. I haven't touched it.
So I've played it a little. So on my new Samsung TV,
Okay.
I don't actually have an Xbox SS. I just have my Samsung TV. I paired a controller to it, and I've been playing Starfield streaming.
Are you serious? How cool.
Yeah, it's pretty
And it's
fucking
quick and it's
amazing.
fast? And it
I
feels
don't even notice any
oh
latency,
my God.
controller
How
latency.
cool. So cool.
It's crazy. It's like,
Awesome.
and I worked on a Stadia game, like an
Mhm.
arcade Stadia game, and it's better than that experience. Like
Wow.
it's optimized. Like I mean, I haven't played anything that's really Twitch based yet, like
Sure.
reflex based.
Yeah.
Starfield's not the fastest paced at the reflex layer, but it's not slow either. And I've never
Yeah.
felt latency,
I
like
mean, and I
controller
think you'd
latency.
feel
I've
it,
just not.
especially as like an FPS guy, like with your experience, right? I feel like you would be tuned in, like the QA for those type, or like the for people who don't know, like quality assurance. When you're going through a game, you're creating, you want to make sure that the game's perfect before the game comes out. That doesn't always happen. It may not usually
Yeah.
happen, but ideally it happens. So,
Right.
uh, with Chris's
Oh,
background, creating some of the best games, right? Like in that space for a long time, right? The QA is just so the quality assurance is so intense, trying to figure out exactly how to make this controller feel like you are holding the gun, right? Or it's like the latency
right.
is gone.
Or it's part of your body,
Yeah.
right? And I think that's the larger game design thing. While we're at it, let's talk about FPS.
Okay.
FPS is not frames per second, although it can sometimes mean that.
Sure.
In the context that we're using, FPS stands for first person shooter. So literally, if I can describe this for somebody that doesn't game, it's looking through the eyes of the main character, and mostly what you see is your arms or what you're holding. Actually, here's an interesting discussion. We'll put a pin in this one for another time. The relationship that the player has with their hands in first person shooters,
Mhm.
because that's your identity. Like,
Yeah, you are the hands, right?
you are the
Or
hands, you are
the
the
gun.
gun. And so that space, like, we can talk about it because there's a whole psychological impact there as far as
Mhm.
like relating to things. So, well, vis-a-vis like Mario 64, I'm relating to that character. What do you do in a first person shooter? You have to relate to the hands. And so hand design is actually super important. Okay, anyway, back to Starfield. What's interesting about that game, and I don't know, I can only theorize what happened from a production standpoint, but generally, when I'm cruising around a planet, the possibility space feels limited, right?
Oh, how interesting. Oh, and so is the basic gameplay loop of this game like you have a ship and you go to different kind of planets and
Yeah, you
you
can
do
fly
stuff?
to other
Okay.
planets and do different stuff.
Okay.
Um, in space, it's interesting because they're caught between transportation,
Mhm.
right? Like it's a warp, and space gameplay.
Mm.
Like I want to shoot things and explore and do stuff.
Is it
Okay.
is it kind of like Eevee or like Eve Online E, or is it more like Star Fox E or like something that?
No. It's more like space sim. Like you can
Okay.
fly. You can fly to the moon if you want. Like literally the Earth's moon. You
Oh,
can.
nice.
You,
Okay.
you know. And I think like you have to jump from system to system. But
Mm.
once you're in system, you can real time fly to any planet
That's cool. Okay.
and do some exploration.
But it's in between
Now,
like transportation and actually wanting to be like real game, like
yes,
gameplay.
yeah, and so it's well because there's a streamlining that's happened, which is like I need to go to the city that has my quest stuff in it. By the way, in the cities are ginormous. In
Hmm.
fact, almost to the point of overload, where you're
Oh, okay.
like
So more than seven in that
more
sense.
than seven. Like basically, the amount of things that you can do in a city far exceeds your possibility space,
Wow.
right? But there's also other places that are smaller, like a mining camp or something like that. Like
Mhm.
basically single use places or places that you come back transitionally. So the this is also true in like your Fallouts or your Skyrims, like where they're like you can guarantee that certain things will always be there, like a gun store and a food store and a clothing store and stuff like that is always in the cities, but it's also full of other stuff. And so there's a little bit of like I'm not exactly sure what to do in once I get to these city
So
spaces.
what do you so like my experience with like for example Fallout New Vegas, right? Like if I go
Yes.
into the capital in that game, New Vegas, as I think about it, right?
Yep.
Um,
Yeah.
I didn't. I don't know if I probably felt a feeling of a little bit of overwhelm or fear going into it initially. I think some of that is story based, and then generally I did not feel
Overwhelmed.
overwhelmed. Right? Like, what do you think is
Yep.
different?
So I think though, okay, let's talk about exceeding 7
Sure.
real quick because this is actually going to describe what's happening in your brain at that point, but also generally a tool for game design. All right.
Cool.
So game designer's POV, and then you should take a second to explain it.
Okay. Yeah.
Game
Very good.
designer's POV. If you're presented with more than 7 things that are individual, your brain will then employ strategies to equalize the load back to 7. Okay. So a phone number 1234567. Add the area code. You now have 10 digits. 310. Well, 310 is actually not 3 numbers, it's a thing represented by 3 numbers. And that thing is, oh, that's LA.
Hmm.
So it's now I can remember these 7 digits, but I'm going to put it in the LA bucket, right?
Right.
Or it's 212 or 917, right? Like I'm like, "Oh, it's a Brooklyn number."
It's cool that you say
Right.
this because, or is it more or not? Or
Well,
yeah,
so
yeah,
well, let me finish the thought, which is
yeah.
basically
Please,
like
please.
so now I'm not actually thinking about the area code or containing it in my head. I've put it to a place of reference.
Mm-hmm.
So if I need to memorize 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, I can. And in my brain palace, I've made a place called Brooklyn phone number.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a second association, which is, my friend Bob, right? And so my friend Bob lives in Brooklyn, and here's the number I memorized, which is 7 digits. And so like I've done a layer check on this, which is like I have different context for all of that information. So I don't have to remember the whole string, which is Bob, who lives in Brooklyn, has a 917-123-4567 phone number. I've memorized all the pieces and associated them together. All right. In game design, part of the way that this works is there's 4 enemies on screen, and then a 5th one shows up, and then a 6th one. I'm at capacity because I'm also thinking about self.
Mm-hmm.
And so now my brain comes up with a strategy to start to contain the enemies. And I go, these 4 are on the right and these 2 are on the left. They are now 2 things. There's a group of 2 and a group of 4. But I'm now no longer engaging them as individuals.
It makes sense. Yeah, I mean, it's cool to see the same kind of system take place. And I'll share about like the brain side of things, and then I'm curious like the different implementations within like the design space as a result. So there are 2 kind of systems that are being talked here, and I love the way you described it too. There's the brain palace, and then there's kind of the rule of 7s. So in your brain, kind of the correlation here is, or what a different lens to look at this is through like the lens of neuroscience or like neurophysiology, right? But in essence, your brain palace is kind of, it's a place called your hippocampus. So if you've listened to brain podcasts or you've thought about the brain, you may have heard that word hippocampus a lot. In essence, what it is just where your long-term memory is stored. So things like your name, those can be declarative. So things like your name, who was the first president, what is the area code 310 defer to, right?
Right.
And the other part is something called our working memory. So that's a different part of our brain. The hippocampus is actually sitting kind of in the middle of your brain, kind of a little bit deeper in the middle of your brain. Whereas our working memory uses a lot of something called the prefrontal cortex. Now, there's all these big words, but some of them are Latin, some of them are crazy, and you're like, oh my God. For me, I'm like, oh my gosh, how can I ever remember any of these? Yeah. But what they actually mean is they're just talking about the location. So cortex means outside. It's just the outside part of your brain. Neocortex, new cortex, it's just the outside part.
Right. So by the way, just real quick, translation to crisscross speak, RAM and ROM.
RAM. Yeah, it's RAM and ROM. Yeah, exactly correct.
Yeah.
So you've got your RAM is in the front part of your brain. That's right. So you in your working memory, you have a certain amount of things you can hold on to, right? If you're interested, you can actually increase that by having more prefrontal cortex, so doing things like meditating or less drugs or drinking more water. These are types of things we can do to increase our prefrontal cortex gray matter, which is again a bunch of words, but basically it just means the amount of good cells over there, or amount of good parts in the front of your brain, right? So the front of our brain focuses on this theory of 7s, right? Which is our working memory is really limited. And I always tell my wife, I go, Sarah, I love you so much, but I need to write down the 3 things that I've heard you say already that I need to get done, because otherwise I won't remember the 4th, but also as a result, I won't remember any of them, because I'm
right.
And that's me, because there's kind of nested loops right within those 3. But it's really important to be considerate of, hey, look, I'm actually pretty limited in the present moment. But the way that we learn things over time is we take the what we learn in the working memory, and then we bring it to the middle of our brain, to the hippocampus, or our brain palace, our long-term memory. And then we can use what's in that long-term memory almost as shortcuts to make the working memory easier. And that's how we acquire skills. So from a design perspective, I imagine there's a kind of on-ramping of learning, right? First, you learn how to
Mhm.
jump, then you learn how to crawl, then you learn how to jump and crawl in parallel, and suddenly that can be in a bucket of like, hey, this is a sequence of actions that I take. I store that in my long-term memory.
So this is interesting because it makes me think about the way I think about like the decision loops and layers.
Mhm.
And RAM stands for what is it? Random access memory?
Oh, I don't remember. I know
And
memory is the
then
last one, but
ROM is read only memory, which is your long term. And so I'm not going to give accurate or even really good explanations of that for somebody who's not into computers. But essentially, one is short term and one is long term,
Mhm.
right? So we have RAM and ROM, or prefrontal cortex and hippocampus, right? By the way, there's a really great arcade game from like 86 or 7 called like Hippodrome, or maybe
Uh,
it's from like 93. Yeah, it's more like 90. I think it's like early 90s. Anyway, between 88 and 92 or something, we'll look it up.
Hippodrome.
There's what Hippodrome, and it's basically an arena fighter. It's
Um,
fantastic. It's not that advanced. It's probably really boring now, but it's fucking great. Right? Hippodrome is like the fantasy of it. The reason I say it's amazing is because like it's so fulfilled, like whatever, like Jason and the Argonauts fighting in like a Coliseum, right? Like
mm,
it's really cool. So it just everything about it felt cool. Well, that's a topic for a different discussion. Okay, so what I'm building when we're designing and we're talking about these different decision layers, and the reason I say it happens on a rhythm is because I'm wondering, and here's my question, is like the change in decision space and what's going on. And the reason why I say Skyrim has like basically like I used a 5-minute loop. It's
mhm.
basically within it's maybe closer to 3, but it's like every 5 minutes I can change my decision space, which hits a different layer, right? Which hits my planning brain,
Mhm.
which is basically saying, hey, hippocampus, or hey, what's going on there? What is it that I need to care about so that
Mhm.
I can make this decision in the instant? And so I think, and here's my hot take, and we'll sort of go for this. The the way to avoid the statement this game feels repetitive is basically at regular intervals changing the decision space, and it's not random, it's basically very planned, so that you are presented with seemingly new decisions across time, and you're essentially sending messages back and forth between those two parts of your brain at regular intervals
Mhm.
to keep them both active. So if my prefrontal cortex is the only one that's engaged,
Mhm.
you get fatigued. If it's just my planning brain and long-term memory and like the repetition of reflex actions is
Yeah.
so automatic, then basically I can also get bored because I'm not changing the way I'm doing my reflex actions based on what's going on in my long-term planning. And so you have to change both decision spaces at regular intervals to keep the brain from getting bored. And so this expresses itself in like video game ramping,
Mhm.
where I get like I'm going to try and use like an example that everybody will know. Oh, look, I found a cannon in the ground in Mario 64. What is that good for? It's in the prefrontal area. I use it once or twice and then I file it away as like, oh, it's fast navigation and I can shoot myself around the world. And now there's a skill,
Mhm.
aiming, putting it somewhere. There's a place to explore. Where am I going to land? What happens if I put on like like a flight cap, or like, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah. Yeah.
basically, if we come up with a new instant activity, but then at some point it moves into the back of your brain, or the middle of your brain as like, this is a useful tool. How can I use this to either change my route or get to a star faster or do something else? And so I've started with something that is interesting in the instant, which is like, oh my God, getting shot out of a cannon is amazing,
Sure.
right? And then turned it into, oh, it's actually useful because look where I land. And then eventually it turns into, I need to get to this place You don't even think about the activity of the cannon. You just automatically aim to the right spot, and it becomes like a transportation thing, fully transitioning it into like planning brain.
What? Yeah, I mean, I think you're exactly correct. So what's coming up for me is almost the extent to which something is new, right? It's almost like we're balancing the newness
Yeah.
because one of the single biggest things to like excite someone is just like how new it is. It's one of like the
Uh-huh.
easiest levers to pull, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And our brain is pretty, it's very energy efficient. So it doesn't allow for, or it tries not to have energy misuse, right? But if
Mhm.
we need to get pulled in the long, like kind of pathfinding, decision making, longer kind of headspace, and we feel like we're getting pulled in the short term headspace, right? Of like kind of reflexes, etc. That combination can be overstimulating. So it makes sense to me that it's almost like a seesaw, like a teeter totter of my kind of the flow of my attention is going towards the back of my brain or the middle of my brain to the front of my brain to the middle, and they're corresponding with each other. It makes a lot of sense.
That that's interesting to me because it makes me start to think about some of the ways that I've thought about design as far as like, you know, putting words to what I know intuitively, right?
Yeah,
Because like newness, the business of making games is also about efficiency. I can only like you have to plan on on a couple of things that are impossible problem spaces. How do I do this thing infinitely, or at least enough to make it worth $60,
That's true.
right?
Yeah.
And then also, how do I continue to make it feel new, but it's a magic trick? Like, how do I make this loop very repetitive so that it's reliable, but at the same time, make it feel new at regular intervals so that you don't get bored?
And I imagine you can accomplish that in a lot of different ways, right? So like one example, I like if I think about Skyrim, we're doing that through new content, right? So like the loops are the same. It's the same combat, it's the same enemies for the most part, but what's new about that is maybe it's a unique piece of treasure, maybe it's the layout of the castle is unique and it's like unique kind of one and done content. Whereas other games like Vampire Survivors, right? It's like
Yeah.
this unique situation, whether it's like my character loadout or the way the enemies are coming towards me is like very new, right? On an ongoing basis. Is it does that like feel right
Yeah,
to
that's part of it.
you?
We've essentially sort of backed our way into discussing a progression system,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
And so essentially, what is the player's progress in time and
Hmm.
what new things are we rewarding them with on that schedule? And so, Skyrim has a skill tree, and every level that you make, you choose your reward. Is it I'm going to get better at daggers or am I going to get better at swords?
Hmm.
And it puts you into this like reward headspace. And so, like referencing back to our reward conversation, it's you need the carrot and the stick. So I need to make a level somehow by doing some of this repetitive stuff so that I can get the reward, which then changes what the challenge is of trying to make the next level.
Hmm.
And so there is a back and forth built into that system, but the rhythm of that, like you need to dig into it to make it not feel just like a grindy, repetitive nonsense, which is my problem with most mobile games today. There's plenty of grind. There's
Yeah.
plenty of like reward system stuff. In fact, you can see into the future, like that stuff all equals time. Time is the most valuable resource for humans. And
Hmm.
you start to look at the valuation of like how much of my time do I want to put into this? And then it really comes back to in our human way how to simplify stuff. Is the stuff that I'm doing by reflex worthwhile? Does it feel good to just do the same thing? And it's difficult for me at my age and experience to play something and not see the repetitive treadmill,
Hmm.
and the rewards aren't worth it.
That's right.
right? And so anyway, I digress a little bit because like let's get back to like let's round out. Let's finish with Starfield.
Mhm.
There's nothing wrong with Starfield. I'm having a blast,
Oh, okay.
right?
Okay.
I'm good with it. However, there are times when I have analysis paralysis because I've got so many missions already, and I have more missions that I feel like I'm making progress.
Mm.
So that like to me, what it indicates is there is an imbalance in various places in that game that prevent it from being amazing.
Mm. Okay.
So there's a cognitive load imbalance,
Mhm.
and there's also a transitional space imbalance. So okay, you can verify this or not.
Mhm.
Walking through a door subconsciously reframes your brain.
I'm very open to it.
Okay, so the idea being that
Ooh.
your
Oh, I can help. I can give you actually something on this. So
okay, go ahead.
our long-term memory, right? Our
Yeah.
hippocampus is actually it's highly connected to spatial memory. That's what it's actually used for, is spatial memory.
Uh-huh.
So we learn things based on where they are in the environment related to other things.
Yeah.
That's how it registers. So it's like, okay, where in space and time was I when this event occurred? How important is this? And then depending on how important it is how much it's going to seep in and integrate for long term.
Okay. Okay.
Um,
Oh, this
we,
is really cool. I have a follow-up on this.
sure. We have doors.
Uh-huh.
In our
Right.
world, we are now in 2024, and there are doors
Yeah.
everywhere.
Yeah.
And that actually represents different, almost like it's almost we can expand our memory into literally 3D space, right?
Uh-huh.
In a lot of ways, and
Uh-huh.
it can represent different compartments. Like,
Yes.
and I'll have a quick aside, really quick. The brain science changes quickly. If you're listening to this and even like A, you may know more about it than me, which I'm always open to. But B, brain science changes a lot. So like in the last 20 years, like 80% of the brain science has been rewritten. And it's gonna happen
Uh-huh.
again. So
Okay.
I
Okay.
what I'm using as fact and bring to as fact, if you're listening to this in 2044, 4 out of 5 times I roll dice,
Uh,
it's gonna say it's wrong. So just
okay.
as a
It,
frame.
it,
So
sure. Actually, my disclaimer is basically this is what I learned in game design. You may talk about it differently, but we're searching for how to describe it now in words, right?
yes, yeah,
So okay, doors.
doors.
All right. So I don't know where I got this, probably off of some bullshit like Twitter or Facebook. All right, you're working and you need to reframe your brain to start a new task, kind of a thing, or
Mhm.
context switch. Get up and go to the bathroom because you're going to go through 2 doors or more, change your context, and then come back and have a fresh look at whatever the new context is.
Mhm.
So essentially, it's a way to like erase the whiteboard and then to start scribbling on it again. Is basically get up, walk through a door or two, and come back and change your brain space. So
Mhm.
it's whether it's going to the bathroom or getting water, or even just literally walking into another room, taking a quick visual inventory, changing your thoughts and coming back is like a way to sort of change your context. Okay, I think the opposite. Well, the opposite is also true. Going through a door puts you into a space where you automatically evaluate the space, right?
Mhm.
Now let's correlate that to load screens. When you hit a load screen, your brain starts prepping for a context switch. In Skyrim and Fallout, the world is contiguous. In
Yeah. Right.
Starfield, the act of space travel introduces a minimum of 3 load screens,
Hmm. Do you find that you
right?
feel like
Well,
disjointed or like
no, the problem, I think the way that I can summate this problem and the way to fix it is it's not actually the change in context that's the problem. You
Mhm.
need to do that. You need to get in your spaceship and then like walk through a couple doors, get to the seat,
Mhm.
like actually go into orbit, open the map, change your context a little bit, pick a planet or pick a star system, like fly to that star system. Then you get there and then you're in another context. You're like, I'm now in system context,
Sure.
right? I now have a thing is I think coming back and balancing the decision space a little bit and evaluating that game from a screen by screen sort of procession, and either eliminating some of the barriers to get from place to place, or presenting more meaningful decisions in different areas at different times to fill the brain with possibility space will change the feel of that game. Because like one of the things, you get to a planet, there's only one point of interest and maybe some minerals,
Mhm.
and then all of a sudden you've lost that feeling of anywhere I go could be an adventure.
Mm. Mhm.
And so that loss didn't translate well to getting into a spaceship and going across space.
Yeah, because it's almost like you had to invest more. It's like more time, it's more effort, and then really didn't give it all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also space as an analog to the walking world of Skyrim doesn't work as well because it's so mechanically layered
Mhm.
that you don't have this organic feeling of like, I'm going to fly my spaceship 5 minutes and find new possibility spaces. There's some of that, but that's not pushing everything forward.
Right.
It's like, it's interesting because that game starts on the ground, and I wonder if that game would be doing better if it started in space. So
Because you
my
set up the
brain
context immediately.
well, because you're setting up that your main way of getting around is to fly.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember the intro. No, the intro fucking starts in a cave,
Okay.
right?
Just like Skyrim.
And just like Skyrim. Well, Skyrim starts
Oh, it
in
starts in
on
a
a
keep
wagon,
or whatever. Yeah, and then
right?
you
In
go
that
into a
keep,
cave.
which is an appropriate design decision. Start in a small space so that I can get my
Yeah.
bearings. However, what it does set up that I think is where the dissonance happens is that walking is a primary mode of transportation, and they're treating a spaceship like a horse, which is like making walking faster. But the thing is the context, the world context is changing, and the use case for the player is changing. Like the
Oh,
discover
dude.
space is space.
I
The
oh,
discover space is not walking.
I have like a very hot question for you.
Okay.
Oh, this is like a nasty question. Okay.
Okay.
Do you think the game, I think you're right that the game, there's a real chance that the game would be better, or I'm extrapolating, right? That the game would be better if it started in space. But then I think like my brain flashed back to a game called Spore, which was out like in the kind of
Oh,
late
sport.
2000s, and it was one of EA's like big kind of freaking breakthrough games. But people hated Space Stage. They hated it, right? And
Uh,
I feel curious if by making this game start in space, would people understand its true nature quicker and thus hate it, or thus not enjoy it as much?
that's a possibility because if you follow the pattern of it's Skyrim in space. Let's just go with
Yeah,
that,
sure.
right? Or it's Fallout in
It's Fallout
space
Engines.
minus the VAT system,
Uh-huh.
right? And if we do that and treat the spaceship as a vehicle to take you fast travel from town to town,
Hmm.
then I think the balance of that system needs to be less of an experience and more about transition.
Yeah. Like you go much more almost like it's totally a cutscene. We're
Yeah.
done. We move through and now we're back on foot.
I am magically in a new place on foot.
Yeah.
I appreciate the space flight. I think it's great. And in fact, I think there's a place for it in the game, but I'm not sure that like, you get to it relatively quickly.
Mhm.
But here's the double-edged sword of deciding of like how, starting with the premise of Skyrim in space, or sorry, Fallout in space, right? Is what I said about the decision space on the planets. Is they need a mechanism to give you the decision space across the
Mhm.
galaxy, not just a singular world. And so like breaking it up like that is a cognitive problem because by the nature of the width of that game, how big it is, they cannot provide enough decision space on individual planets without going bankrupt,
Mm.
right? They can't make, like, essentially you can't make every planet feel like Skyrim. that's impossible.
Right.
Like there's no way to do that. But like going through 3 or 4 cognitive changes to arrive at a place where there's like a 2-room adventure.
Right.
And then like, do you see what I'm saying? It's like there's an imbalance in the way that you're setting expectations for how everything works, especially if you're starting in a context of previous games. Now, I'm open to it. I actually enjoy the game a lot.
Okay.
And in fact, because I can identify the things that are very different and I understand the design decisions to get where we're at, I actually really appreciate it. And I want to fly more manually in space, but I'm also an adult that has not a lot of time.
Right.
Right. And you can fast travel from place to place and skip a lot of stuff. Right.
Mm.
But it's less a systems issue and a little bit more of like a possibility space thing. And it's so much more self-directed that I think people get lost. Like I said, there are times where I feel paralysis of it, like analysis paralysis, because I can literally do like 20 things right now and they're all separated by loads. Right, which is fine, but it's like basically my brain is trying to hold on to like 6 planets with 2 or 3 things a piece with X, Y, and Z. You know what I mean? Like and like the layer, it's like it's a multi-layer cake, and it's very hard to hold. Like, what is it I'm supposed to do? Where am I going? Like, it's a design. There's some serious design challenges. I think they've done an amazing job with what they had
I think that's a
and how
perfect
they
statement.
built it.
Yep.
But I think that I don't even know that I have solutions for what I think are necessarily like cognitive issues with it. At least not from my armchair.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm having a good time with it. I'm actually like, don't change it, ship it.
Yeah,
Right?
sure.
Here, I'll put my production hat on. Like, ship it.
That's fine.
It's fine.
It's fine. Just
It's
go
good.
for it.
Now, and I think we're sort of close to wrapping this topic because I think like a part of this that's like the internet has become binary, love, hate, like, and the hate will always hit right after things ship.
Yep.
And like, they will take a molehill and make a fucking galaxy out of it and blow it out of proportions. And for me, what's been really fun about this topic is like, I think there's a balanced look at stuff of like 6 game designers can get the same game idea and they will all build it differently.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's nothing wrong with the way anybody builds it.
Yep.
And so I'm not saying that Starfield is flawed. It's not even saying that. I'm just saying that the design decisions that led us to where we are in analysis through the lens of cognitive load.
Yeah, right.
Right, has led us to where we are. And so if the new goal is to balance the cognitive load, it would change the feel of the game. For better or for worse, I don't know. I'd have to like load the editor and try up a few things, right? At, a couple $1 million a month. That's an expensive experiment.
Yes.
Right? Just guessing. I'm sort of ballparking, but it's not cheap. It's not cheap to run these experiments or iterate on this stuff,
No,
right?
It's ridiculously expensive. Yeah.
Hence, 18,000 people are looking for jobs this year in the games industry. Do you have any comments? So I think we should wrap this.
No, I think we're good there.
I feel like I think we're good. Like we started with a sort of destination of like let's talk about decision space and Starfield, right? And like the rule of sevens. And so like there's like an interesting thing there where we explained it. Here's an example. Here's a place where it's working. Here's a place where it's not working. Mm-hmm. I think we can dive deeper because I use the rule of sevens as an evaluation tool all the time.
Yeah.
All the time. Because but I only ever trigger it when somebody says, oh, it's just boring. I look at 2 things. What's your rewards space and what's the decision space? And if it's either not rewarding enough or variable enough to keep me engaged to be an old lady hitting a button again, or the decision space isn't carrying messages back and forth between my hippocampus and my prefrontal cortex. And so basically to identify that problem, we look at the rule of sevens to try and find a clue as to like what a solution could be for this feels repetitive or this is boring or like, like I'm your feeling Sherpa. Like I'm trying to figure out why you feel the way you do.
Right.
Because players say stuff like that all the time. This doesn't feel good.
and then we need to figure out why, or like, and
This
then
feels boring.
how do we
Yeah.
fix it?
Yeah.
No, I think it's really cool, and I think there's a lot of places we can go with content of just like evaluating an actual title, and like allowing that to be an anchor, for example, where it's like,
I agree. I actually think that's going to start building into this formula for what people can expect,
yeah, I do
which
too.
is there's a hot take, there's a real game example
Yeah.
with some real world explanation stuff too. I think that's a winning formula for us.
Brain Arcade is a Princess Hermit production, produced by Kyrene Kim, music and mixing by Jonathan Ontiveros. The podcast is hosted by me, Chris Cross. You can find me and my other endeavors at coffeeorcross.com.
Electric